Jaskin Corlia. Agus araid a chanis tá price na electrachas leir dúris agus tá seogal bhfuilú níos mó na 10 billion chailí agus is ceniu wufa sé an ceniu tá diantig fan na gael agus ag fianna bhfuil na creidifas a foniu a páir in siar sé cain asnis. Tá breis agus 300 míle tithe na bhfuileabalta a go electrachas ag an fonte seo agus caihí an takeíocht seo bhéar bhfuil san cain asnis a mí iarú fóver. Taoiseach, workers and families are getting absolutely hammered with soaring prices. And while your government acts as if everything's rosy in the garden, the cost of living crisis is out of control. Households are under huge pressure to get by. They're being hit by rip-off prices at every turn. It's rent, it's food, it's insurance, it's petrol and diesel, it's student fees, it's the local property tax. Everything is sky high and there's no end to it, and people can't catch a breath at the moment. And now, as if things weren't bad enough, we have the big energy companies that come along with another big hike in electricity prices, just as we head into the darker months of the year. Energy is going to jack up their electricity prices by 12%, Bord Gas by over 13%, Pinergy are putting up their prices by over 9%, and households, as we know, are already paying some of the highest electricity prices in Europe. And more than 500,000 customers are going to be hit by these latest increases in the next couple of weeks. Many are now going to be forced to fork out hundreds of euro additional, money that they simply do not have. And the real kicker for people, Taoiseach, is that your government is choosing to make matters worse, because at the very time when these companies are fleecing them again, you have decided to withdraw energy credits in the budget. It's a terrible decision and one that you need to reverse. The job of the government is to shield households from these hikes. That means ending the rip-off, getting prices under control and supporting workers and families in this budget. But what you're doing is you're doing the exact opposite. You've sat on your hands and you're sitting on your hands. All the while, energy companies are making massive, massive profits. We know wholesale prices for electricity have fallen since the start of the year. So there's absolutely no justification for these companies to be squeezing and to be gouging their customers as they are doing. It is barefaced greed and rampant profiteering. And it is it any wonder that there are 300,000 households as we speak that cannot pay their electricity bill. You've allowed this energy rip-off to go unabated. You've allowed it to happen for many years. You've done nothing to put manners on the energy companies. Not only have you done nothing, but you've actually pushed back against our proposals to get energy prices under control. We proposed giving the energy regulator powers to hold these companies to account. You ignored it. We proposed legislation to monitor and regulate standing charges and hedging practice. You ignored it. We proposed restructuring the PSO levy so that large energy users such as data centres pay their fair share rather than placing that burden on domestic customers, households and small businesses. You ignored it. So you're up to your neck in this rip-off. So it's scandalous that you've now come along, your government comes along and you say to people out there that you're on your own, that you've allowed the energy companies a free rein, and now you decide to cancel the energy credits that hard-pressed households have been dependent on. Where is the fairness in that? Are you not listening to the people? People right across this state are just about hanging in there. They can't take much more. And folks are going to come under huge pressure this winter. They're already under huge pressure, but they're going to come under more pressure. Prices going up by double digits and government withdraws electricity credits. You need to change course. This will be the final straw for many. So you need to wake up, Taoiseach, and listen to what people are saying. Understand what people are facing in relation to this rip-off. And you need to now accept, and I ask you, do you accept now, given the raft of energy companies that have announced that they're going to increase their prices the week of the budget, do you now accept that withdrawing the energy credits is a step too far Doherty. And is a decision that you will now reverse?
Thanks very much, Cian Corla. Look, can I just begin today by expressing the great shock and sadness that I know we're all feeling as a country about the deeply tragic and upsetting scene unfolding in Donabate. We've been gripped as a country for weeks by the search for this missing little boy, and until today we did not know his name, but we do know it now. His name was Daniel. Until today we'd not seen his face, but now the image of this beautiful little boy is seared in our consciousness, and I know there's a There's a Garda investigation ongoing into both the scene and the circumstances. That has to be allowed do its work, but I think it's fair to say this is a moment of significant public distress and concern, and the state processes must be thorough and robust in establishing all the facts. Thank you very much, Deputy Doherty, for raising what is a very important issue, and I do know that the cost of energy is a real concern for families across the country, and it's a real concern as the evenings get darker, as the evenings get colder. And I want to assure people at home that this is a government that is taking action to help people with the cost of energy. And actually, it's from next week, from Monday, the fuel season actually begins. It's from Monday, the 22nd of September, that for the next 28 weeks, we will have fuel allowance payments being paid to over 400,000 homes right across the country. This is a payment worth around €924 in the fuel season. It can be paid in a weekly amount of €33, or it can be paid in two lump sum payments of just over €460. And as a result of decisions we made in the last budget, more people than ever before will qualify, because you'll remember in the last budget we took decisions that meant that actually the means test that had applied to people over the age of 70 will now apply to people from the age of 66. So I do want people at home to know, particularly those most in need, those most vulnerable, those most in need of assistance, that fuel allowance season does kick off from Monday, and it can be applied very easily from mywelfare.ie, and indeed if you've received the payments in the past you don't need to reapply. I also want people to know that we've already taken some other decisions to try and help people more broadly with the cost of energy. We took the decision when we came back to government to extend the 9% VAT rate for gas and electricity. This is providing a relief for both families and businesses. I'm not sure whether it was a measure you were supportive of or had proposed. It's a costly measure, but it's absolutely the right thing to do. Lowering the VAT rate on people's bills in the here and now. We didn't need to wait for any budget or for you to stand up at leaders' questions and ask us to do it. We took that decision, we've done it, we've implemented it, and that makes a difference on people's bills. In the National Development Plan, only before the summer recess, we allocated €3.5 billion to EirGrid, because we've got to get better in terms of our energy supply in this country, which has a direct knock-on consequence in terms of cost. And crucially, we have established a cross-government energy affordability task force, because you're right, energy in this country is too high. And that task force was charged with its first item to produce an interim report to look at what measures can be taken to support customers this winter, and indeed to be produced and given to the Minister in advance of Budget 2026, so it can help us inform decisions that we may wish to take then. So yes, you're right, this year we're moving back to an annual budget process. That's true. It's not the same thing as saying that we don't intend to take actions to help families with the cost of living. But we've got to take measures that are sustainable and that are permanent. And we're moving away from one-off to permanent, sustainable measures. And I've given you a number of examples there of practical decisions we've taken. Yes, targeting money at those most in need through the fuel allowance. I'm sure you'll welcome the expansion of it, welcome the fact that it starts on Monday for the next 28 weeks, but also more broadly the 9% VAT rate, which everybody's bills benefit from, and now the Task Force on Energy Affordability under Minister O'Brien's leadership, chaired by him, that brings a range of stakeholders, including the ESRI, together to look at proposals, and that's due to report to the Minister very shortly as well. So I want people at home to know we hear you on the cost of energy, we know about the cost of living, and it's usually right that you wait for the budget until you criticise it.
Deputy Doherty.
Well, you've made it very clear, and this is why we do criticise your decision, you've made it very clear that you're withdrawing energy supports in this year's budget. What people have been dependent on and relying on for the last 3 years, and even with that and the other measures, fuel allowance, which has been there for years, and yes, it has been extended and expanded, and I welcome that. But it's been there, and still today we have 300,000 households that can't pay their electricity bill. We have nearly 200,000 households that can't pay their gas bills. And you have decided, your government has decided, despite the fact that 4 companies have come out now and said that we're increasing our prices by double-digit increases the week of the budget or slightly before, and you've decided to say that energy credits aren't going to make a way into the budget this year. It is the wrong decision. And I say to you, and I'm sure that you're listening to the same people that are talking to me, people who are pushed to the pin of their collar, people who know they're being ripped off, They know that the big energy companies are ripping them off, but your government has done nothing about it. As I said, you've pushed back against the proposals that we had to actually bring these prices under control. But it's the same with insurance, it's the same with rents, it's the same with foods. It's all talk and no action. The one action that you can have that will give support to people in the here and now is make sure that energy credits play a central part in a cost of living package in the budget. We are very clear it should be in the form of €450 that will support people right here, right now, because you have failed, your government has failed to bring these companies under control in terms of the prices that they're charging, which are absolutely gouging people at this point in time.
Look, I don't want to be too argumentative the first week back, but I mean the Sinn Féin proposal to help people with their energy bills was to subsidise these massive energy companies. That was your proposal, to give our taxpayers money to the energy companies. That was bonkers now, in fairness, and I think you reflected that and changed your policy. You weren't a big fan of the energy credits. I don't think you even committed to them in your manifesto. So you're now kind of jumping on every bandwagon going. We're going to take action, and energy costs are real, and I don't disagree with you, by the way, that the cost of energy in Ireland is too high and that it is a real cause of worry for people. I'm telling you today, and more importantly, I'm telling the people of this country today, what we're doing to help those in need. With the fuel allowance season kicking off on Monday for more people than ever before, that will make a real difference to your constituents and mine, with more benefiting in your county and mine than ever before. I'm also telling you about other practical measures we've taken in the here and now, including the VAT, reducing the VAT rate on people's energy bills. That was a practical measure, a costly measure, but the right thing to do. But I do agree on this. There's a structural issue in relation to our energy market that we need to get on top of. And that's why one of the first acts that Minister O'Brien took was establish the Task Force on Energy Affordability. The first thing it was asked to do was to look specifically at measures that can be taken for this winter and measures that can inform the government in advance of the budget. And I expect the Minister to receive that report very shortly.
Thank you. Deputy Ivana Bacik.
And Taoiseach, like you, I want to acknowledge the very sad news emerging from Donabate, and we all think of the little boy Daniel Arabose. Our councillor Corinna Johnston expressing this morning on the radio the great sadness and distress of the community in Donabate at the sad find. Taoiseach, the genocide taking place in Gaza has reached intolerable levels of cruelty and carnage over the summer. More than 65,000 people killed. A famine declared. The Famine Review Committee saying 100% of the population in Gaza now experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity. Children dying of starvation, being orphaned, being shot in the head in the street. There are literally no words to describe the destruction of human life and infrastructure that we're witnessing on a daily basis. And words fail us all, I think, when we learn of the atrocities being committed by Israel. Taoiseach, the findings of the UN Commission of Inquiry this week should be a turning point for the world, and its conclusion that a genocide is being committed in Gaza should change things. But Taoiseach, the advisory opinion of the ICJ last year should have changed things too, as should the constant stream of deeply horrifying reports from UNRWA, from UNICEF, from individual medics and journalists working in Gaza. But instead, what we've seen is indifference and indeed encouragement by the likes of Germany and by the US, which have egged on Netanyahu and his brutal regime. By arming Israel, those countries are being complicit in the committing of genocide. So Taoiseach, Israel must be isolated by the international community. In every global forum, culturally, in sport, in academia, through trade, in goods and in services. And I know we all agree, no country is too small to make an impact, and Ireland is making an impact, and we've acknowledged your government has been to the fore among European countries. But we can do better, we can do more, and no delay can be justified. On Monday, I joined organisations, including the Congress of Trade Unions, Oxfam, Christian Aid and others at the gates of Leinster House with Senator Francis Black. We're calling for urgent implementation of the Occupied Territories Bill in full, because new research reveals the extent to which EU trade in both goods and services with illegal Israeli settlements. This trade is directly contributing to serious breaches of international law in Palestine. Companies implicated include eDreams, TUI Travel, BNP Paribas, HSBC, Barclays. At home, a Guardian investigation in August revealed that illegally recorded Palestinian phone calls recorded by the Israeli military. These audio files are being stored on Microsoft servers here in Ireland, in Irish data centres. One whistleblower from Microsoft telling The Guardian that suddenly the entire public in Palestine is our enemy. The scale of the illegal interception is extraordinary. And Taoiseach, we cannot stand by while Netanyahu's brutal project is being facilitated by Irish-based infrastructure. We cannot put an FDI-shaped price on human rights. So I welcome the new approach by the European Commission this week and proposed suspension of the Israel-EU agreement. But we cannot leave our response in the hands of obstructive states like Hungary. And I know you've taken issue with them. We need to set an example here. Taoiseach, will you legislate to ban the trade with occupied territories this autumn in goods and in services? Will you take on board the bill that Duncan Smith has proposed for Labour to protect workers who refuse to handle goods coming from the illegal Israeli settlements?
Thanks very much, Deputy Bacik. And I don't know your councillor, Karina Johnson, but I heard her on Morning Ireland this morning, and I thought she spoke for so many people and for her community in terms of the very, very tragic situation. And I thank her for that. Look, firstly, to thank you and your party for the constructive engagement, and of course we'll give consideration to Deputy Smith's bill. Can I just say, from an Irish perspective, literally around now, we've seen 15 young Palestinians safely evacuated from Gaza. 14 of them students who will be coming to study here in Ireland, and one of them coming here on a critical skills visa. They're safely in Jordan, where they'll be medically screened. Obviously, they're coming from a famine zone, a war zone, a place where genocide's happening, and they're due to arrive in Ireland tomorrow. And I just want to thank everybody who's worked so hard. It's very complex to get people, as you can imagine, evacuated from Gaza. You're also right. I mean, we didn't need in this House, or indeed in Ireland, anybody else to tell us there's a genocide happening in Gaza. We're one of the first countries in Europe, if not the first, to call it what it is. But the UN independent inquiry has now found the same thing. We've also seen statements of fact around a man-made famine now in Gaza. So this is no longer just Ireland's view or my view or your view. These are views that are factually based, that are evidence-based, that the world can't ignore. And I do think the European Commission's decision yesterday is hugely significant, because as you know from your engagements at a European level, and as I know from mine, we've been minority voices in this country for quite a long time, and now to have the European Commission ratify proposals yesterday that are very, very far-reaching, quite appropriate and very delayed, by the way, but is not an insignificant moment. I think it's actually a very, very important moment. In practice, this would have a very significant impact on Israel economically, and I believe has the potential to change Netanyahu's calculus in relation to the continuance of the genocide in Gaza. So my priority in the here and now has to be, and I think you'd expect it to be, to try and see if we can get a majority of member states to vote for these sanctions, and to vote for them very quickly. The next meeting of the Foreign Affairs Council, outside a UN one next week, isn't due to be for about 6 weeks. Same with the European Council. There's a genocide going on. We can't wait a further 6 weeks after all the inaction to date. So I'm leading a diplomatic effort to try and get a number of member states to seek an urgent meeting, so that member states can vote, and nowhere to hide here. You're either in favour or you're against these measures to try and help end a genocide. And I hope that can happen as well. At a domestic level, I spoke to Senator Black briefly the other day, and I'm due to meet her on my return from the UN high-level week, which is taking place next week. We are still committed to legislating. Party leaders will shortly meet the Attorney General on how best to do that, and I'm happy to brief opposition as well. But I have to be honest with this House, or to be honest with the people of Ireland, passing our own legislation, again, I don't dismiss that. I'm committed to doing it. But if we want to make impact here, acting at an EU level has always been the best way to do it, because while the political power may seem to be whatever goes on between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, the economic ability that Europe has in relation to Israel and making it change its course is hugely significant.
Well, I thank you for that comprehensive response, Taoiseach, and would welcome a briefing on the Occupied Territories Bill, anything to move things on there. And I absolutely agree with you, the need for transnational and international action. But we can and should also be acting unilaterally, because we have a strong voice of moral authority. And there are like-minded states, and I know this from my engagement at EU level. Spain and Belgium are with us on this, Taoiseach, so we can and should do more on the Occupied Territories Bill. And similarly on the evacuees from Palestine, and I do welcome that, and I welcome your announcement that 15 will arrive tomorrow. I think there were due to be 30, and certainly I've been working with you and with the Minister for Justice to try and ensure we see family reunification for those who've already come here from Gaza on the Medivac programme, some of whom are living in my own constituency and who are desperately distressed as they watch their family members under daily bombardment from Israel back in Gaza. And we are doing all we can to try and get them out, Taoiseach, and I would really welcome more effort from government on that, to get family members out to join the people who are already here. Can I say on the EU level, I welcome your push for an urgent meeting, and can I ask that you would also push at UN level? The government supported a Labour motion in May looking for Ireland to push it at UN level through the General Assembly for the United Nations to take action towards securing a lasting ceasefire in Gaza. And can I ask that you would push on that too?
Yes, so I mean we can and will take action at a national level. I think there's a political consensus around that. We all gave commitments in the election. Happy to do that. But if you also remember, I suppose, the government's position, the previous government's position always was, could we get to a point where Europe might actually act? And that looked very remote back when this genocide started. It now looks like a distinct prospect, and we've got to try and see this through. But one way or the other, in a democratic Europe, we have every right to be able to vote for these proposals and to show that we are voting to take this action against Israel to try and stop what Netanyahu is doing, and that needs to happen. It needs to happen quickly. And you're right, we're not alone. Slovenia, Spain, as you said, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg. I think there's a growing coalition, and indeed France, I think, has played a very constructive role. We may see our near neighbours in the UK take their own decision on recognition in the coming days, which would be a welcome step forward. On evacuations, we remain committed to this. The Minister for Health is doing very good work on this from a medical point of view. We're doing good work in terms of those looking to come here to study as well. We all know there's complexity around this, but anyone we can help in that context, we are helping. And finally, at a UN level, absolutely. Myself, the Taoiseach and Minister Richmond will be in New York for UN High Level Week next week, and this will be a major priority, as you'd imagine.
Deputy O'Callaghan.
Taoiseach, at the outset, on behalf of the Social Democrats, I want to express our absolute revulsion at the threats that were made against you and your family. They've absolutely no place. They are strongly condemned by us all. And I want you to know that we will work with you to do everything we can to ensure that these kind of threats against our democracy are not in any way tolerated. Taoiseach, I want to extend our deepest condolences to all those who knew, loved and cared for Daniel Arabouze. Yesterday, after a long search, the remains of Daniel were found in Donabate. Daniel had been missing for 4 years before the state noticed he was gone. But he was much more than the tragic circumstances of his death and disappearance. I want to thank the Journal for publishing a very moving interview with his foster sister telling us more about him. She said, and I quote, "He was the sweetest little baby ever. We were all absolutely beside ourselves. He was so cute. He was so clever. Obviously might be a little biased, but he already had a strong personality. He loved dancing. He loved laughing. He loved showing off that he understood you. Like we'd go, 'Where's the light?' And he'd know from only a few months old. He'd point up at the light. He was just a very clever baby." His foster sister said the picture released doesn't reflect the happy child she knew who brightened every room he entered. She wants people to know that Daniel was special and loved. Taoiseach, I'm not going to get into the investigation into this tragedy. We don't yet know what has happened. But we do know that something very seriously went wrong. A bright and bubbly child died and disappeared, and no one noticed. Sadly, this is not the only time this has happened. Karen Dernan disappeared in 2022 and is presumed dead. Nobody noticed he was missing until late last year. It's horrifying that children can simply disappear in this country. Taoiseach, TUSLA is conducting a rapid review of its interactions with Daniel's family and referred the case to a national review panel. But that's not good enough. An independent statutory review should be triggered in every case of a child known to TUSLA who disappears. This is the bare minimum these children deserve. This is not to apportion blame. It's to find out what went wrong, to make sure it never happens again, to prevent more children disappearing and dying. Taoiseach, Daniel was failed in life. Let's not fail him in death. Will you establish a statutory review into this tragedy? And what has been done to support the community in Donabate who are grieving and in shock, as is the entire country?
Well, thanks very much, Deputy O'Callaghan, and thank you for your kindness and your solidarity. And I very much appreciated the very kind letter I received on behalf of your parliamentary party from Deputy Cummins. And I look forward to all of us working on a cross-party basis, as suggested by the Cian in terms of safety in public life. And thank you very much for that. You're entirely correct. I think the way you summed up the most horrific and tragic situation in relation to Daniel is right. We don't yet know what went wrong, but something seriously went wrong. Is I think captures exactly the situation that we find ourselves in. And I do want to pay tribute to the Gardaí and all of those that were involved in the search for little Daniel. None of us can really imagine or comprehend how traumatic an experience that must be for all of those on the front line. And we think of them and their own families and the trauma that they must be enduring today, as well, of course, as the incredible trauma being endured by everybody who knew Daniel. And I thought your comments about the sad photo not doing Daniel justice, I thought I saw and I heard a lot of commentary about that this morning on the radio, and I saw a a happy photo released, I think, on RTE there with his arms outstretched, playing with his toys and a beautiful smile that I presume captured the essence of a beautiful young boy, and our hearts break for them now. You ask a fair question, and my honest to God answer is I don't think we can rule anything out at this stage. I do think the responsible thing for us to do here is to try and establish the facts, but we can't rule anything out. So what's the situation as of now? There's obviously the Garda investigation, which you and I rightly didn't comment on. There is TUSLA conducting the rapid review process of their own engagement with Daniel's family. And the Minister for Children has asked that the National Review Panel would prioritise the review of this case. So once the TUSLA rapid review is completed, which I understand will be completed within days, that will then be forwarded to the National Review Panel, and it will examine any engagement that Daniel and his parents had with health, social, educational or any other state services. The National Review Panel has an independent chair, along with its own independent legal advisors, and it makes findings of fact and produces reports that are objective and independent of TUSLA. But I don't rule anything out at this stage, because I think this is a deeply distressing situation that is somewhat evolving in terms of what we're learning in real times. In addition to that, separately, there will be an independently chaired wellbeing review of all child welfare cases that were closed during the COVID-19 pandemic, and where there's been no further contact with the child since. This number now stands at 42,000 when all periods of school closure during COVID, which takes in the early part of 2022 as well as 2020 and 2021, are taken into account. And there's also a number of commitments to also change our own legislation in relation to the Childcare Act, which would provide further protections in relation to child protection and welfare services in the state, and strengthen the child protection legal framework, increase the powers for TUSLA and ensure greater cooperation. But in direct answer to your question, we keep an open mind on exactly what you asked, and we've got to see where the facts bring us in the coming days.
Thank you, Taoiseach, for your response, and I join with your comments in terms of the Gardaí and the frontline workers and the excellent work that they've been doing. Taoiseach, the Irish Association of Social Workers has called for a full statutory review. The Ombudsman for Children, Dr Niall Muldoon, has expressed extreme concern over the State's response. Dr Muldoon said, and I quote, "How could a child have been born, dealt with all the relevant agencies and services, and then apparently just disappear?" Now, he went on to say that the National Review Panel was never established on a statutory basis, and this fundamental flaw has greatly impacted its ability to undertake its work effectively. He's not the only one to criticise the National Review Panel. In fact, both TUSLA and the Department of Children since 2018 have said that it's not fit for purpose, Taoiseach. The National Review Panel has no statutory power, has no powers to access information, no independent authority to publish reports. So it's long gone past needing to have reviews on a statutory basis with proper powers when a child goes missing. We've known this since 2018. The Ombudsman for Children has said it, your Department of Children has said it, TUSLA has said it. So, Taoiseach, will you now commit to what we've all known since 2018, that this needs to be put in a statutory, there needs to be statutory reviews when this happens, when children go missing, known to TUSLA?
Yes is the short answer, and there's a commitment in the programme for government to do just that, and it needs to happen as quickly as possible. I heard the chair of the National Review Panel in recent days. I thought she was very robust in her explanation of the work that they do, and her confidence that that work could be done in a manner that would be expeditious, it would be thorough. They do obviously have independent legal advisors and the likes, but I think the point of putting it on a statutory footing is entirely accepted by government, is a valid point. And I think it would be extraordinarily foolish at this stage for government to rule out any action that may be required in relation to this situation. This has shook our country to its core. It's deeply distressing what's happened, and it's even more distressing now when we see the name and the face of the little boy, Daniel, and are seeking to establish the facts. There will be a Garda investigation that's underway. There will obviously be the rapid review that TUSLA will complete in the coming days. That will then be referred to the National Review Panel, and Minister Foley will then advise government of any further steps or actions that she believes is required. Thank you.
Thank you, Lachlan Cola. Taoiseach, today I ask you about wind farms and the health implications of wind farms. And my journey started with wind farms, and for the health implications for wind farms started with Cool Kappa. When we over 2 years ago, we talked about wind turbines and the health implications. Recently, we had meetings in Bruff with people from Brough, Drummond and Aglaka, and then we had a meeting in Boree recently about wind turbines. And how now that the wind turbines have been taken out of the local authorities section, now that they don't have any input into it, that it's now gone for strategic infrastructure, which means it goes straight on board Penola. There's an influx of wind farms at the moment being applied for across the country. 2006, the health guidelines about wind turbines. In June 2013, Micheál Martin stood in front of Enda Kenny here and told them, and I have it here in front of me, that the implications for health in wind turbines is real. 2019, the guidelines were upgraded, but now we're waiting for the guidelines around wind turbines. We're talking about health here. But did the people in this room know that if a wind turbine goes into your area, and I want nothing against the landholders that are putting up wind turbines. They're entitled to look for it, and I ask people not to go after them. But in the contracts it states for people to put up wind turbines that where the wind turbines go up, they can place them wherever they like within their farms. That could be within 200 or 300 metres of your house, where they have flicker and shadow. It also can be within a place of a school or other places that they are causing health implications. The World Health Organization say 1 metre for every 10. In Ireland, we're 1 metre to every 4. But the World Health Organization are telling you 1 metre in every 10. If a wind turbine company is successful in your area, they can then use, if you want to build a house, or your son or daughter, or anyone in the area, within 3 kilometres of a wind turbine, they can object. And what are their objections? That these wind turbines may cause flicker and shadow. This is what they're telling you within a 3 kilometre. And they're using that as objections against houses themselves. And you also have to sign up that you cannot, if you sign up for it, you cannot object to anything from an environmental perspective within 10 years of your contracts. So on one hand, they're telling you that there's shadow and flicker if you go to build a house, but on the other hand, they're telling you there is no shadow and flicker if they build them close to your house. So when are the guidelines eventually going to be published? You've met the people, Minister, so now I need to know. Thank you.
Taoiseach.
Thanks very much, Deputy O'Donoghue, for raising this issue again today on behalf of your constituents. And I know it's an issue you raise regularly. And look, let me just say at the outset, and I think we agree on this, but it's certainly my position and that of the government, that, I mean, wind energy is a good thing. Renewable energy is a good thing, and certainly the health consequences of not having good, clean, renewable energy far outweighs other issues in terms of health implications. Because, you know, think of all the health implications caused by the climate emergency, and think indeed of all the health implications caused by the burning of fuels that pollute our atmosphere, and all the lung conditions and respiratory conditions, and the impact we've seen in all of our communities from that over very, very many years. And the good work done by our predecessors like Mary Harney on smokeless fuel and the likes as well. So just want to say that. So I think the point you're making, and the point you make frequently and well, is about the need for planning guidelines in terms of communities, local authorities, planning authorities, understanding what are the rules in which planning can be granted in relation to this. And I know I met some of your constituents on this matter previously in the last government as well. So the review of the guidelines has, as you rightly say, been going on for a very long time. I fully accept that point. Indeed, it's been going on for several years now. I am informed, and I spoke to the Minister of State with Responsibility for Planning, Minister Cummins, today, and to Mr Brown before. Significant progress has been made towards now concluding the review process. The review is looking at all the aspects: setback distance, noise, shadow flicker, community obligation, community dividend, which is always an important point, I think, too, and grid connection as well. Now, the noise aspect, I believe, of this review has been highly technical, and it took considerably longer than was perhaps originally expected, but I understand that's now substantially complete. So there is a real effort by Minister Cummins, his officials, his department, to get this right, and I thank him for his work on this. In addition to the noise aspect of the guidelines that added to the length, the evolving policy and technical context, including our new Planning and Development Act, which we passed last year, you'll recall, and the first revision of the National Planning Framework, which was approved by the Oireachtas at the end of April of this year, reinforced the need to get the finalised guidelines right and to make sure they're fit for purpose and fit for that context as well. So what we're trying to do here is strike a balance a balance between the planning views of local communities and the impact on their own areas, and also the need to obviously have renewable, sustainable forms of energy as well. So there is a specific commitment in the programme for government to prioritise the publication of these guidelines. I know Minister Cummins is prioritising this work. A strategic environment assessment has been carried out, and then a public consultation on the draft updated guidelines will take place as well. That will provide you, your constituents, your party, with an opportunity to submit observations on that draft as well, and I'll keep you informed of this too.
Thank you, Donoghue.
Thank you, Taoiseach. In the interim, there's an influx of wind turbines being put up. 16,000 wind turbines is what Eamon Ryan had signed up for in Europe to go inland in Ireland. And then delayed the DMAPs for 5 years so we couldn't look at offshore, and they're talking about renewable energy. Delayed them for 5 years. We're talking about health implications. Did the people know in this room that when the wind turbines are turned off, the wind turbine company gets more money for when their wind turbines are turned off through funds from government than when they're on, because it's based within the contracts that they have. When they're off, they earn more money. So now what they're doing, they're applying for wind turbines in low wind areas, and they're increasing the height of the wind turbines to try and make the statistics work. I was with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael councillors in Bury recently, and they asked us to nail our colours to the mast, and they said they agreed with me for health implications. This needs to happen. They also mentioned Deputy Niall Collins, that he had nailed his colours to the mast, that he said he agreed as well. I need to know from Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, do they agree with the health implications of the World Health implications for people when the wind turbines go up? And will they take full responsibility knowingly that the health organisations have told you that they are causing health implications? And will you take personal responsibility? Because it's knowingly you're doing it, and in legal term, if you're knowingly doing something, you are personally responsible. So please can Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael nail their colours to the mast for the health implications of wind turbines in proximity to houses, schools and other accessories, that they are okay with it. And 19 to 20 years delaying the guidelines is not helping the health implications. We're talking about health.
I'm quite sure that my Fine Gael councillors agree with me as well in terms of wanting to get this right, and in terms of this being about a balance in terms of planning. Look, I would make the point in relation more broadly to health, and I'm sitting beside the Minister for Health. You know, the health impact of climate change, the climate emergency is very, very real. And indeed, we all know in our communities, and I think we all agree on this across the House, I mean, the health implications of people breathing in dirty air has been very, very real in terms of cancers, in terms of respiratory disease. So, I mean, the move to renewables is a really good thing. It's a really, really good thing. And the commitment that we have in this country is to get to 80% of our electricity from renewable sources by 2030. By 2030. But the ownership is I don't want to be argumentative because I know it's an important issue to your constituents, but the ownership issue is a different issue. I'm talking about how we're going to power the country and how we're going to have clean air, and offshore is a very important part, and it'll indeed my constituency will see a significant amount of that. But this is about getting the planning guidelines right. There are lots and lots of different views about health and climate as well. I must look at those points that you make, and I am saying to you, but more importantly, what I'm saying to your constituents today and people I meet across the country looking for guidelines in relation to this, the publication of new revised guidelines is a priority for the government, and we will have an opportunity to have consultation on those guidelines so communities can directly have their say in the coming months, and Minister John Cummins is leading on that for us.
We now move to other members' questions under Standing Order 38A on Deputy McCarthy.